The night was the only time Miles Adler felt truly alive. A low-level electrician in New York, his real passion was sound. Not music, but the subtle, hidden frequencies of the urban dead zones. He was obsessed with finding the spaces the city forgot. He found it in the sub-basement of a derelict Art Deco skyscraper, a relic, a heavy-duty, reel-to-reel tape recorder. The tape inside was unlabeled, silent evidence of some forgotten history. Back in his sound-dampened studio, a refuge layered in cheap foam and ambition, Miles hit play. He expected static, maybe a corporate meeting, but got something far stranger. The sound of an empty room, the steady tick-tock of a clock, the distant urban drone, the nearly inaudible hiss of stale air. 24 hours of recording without a single human voice or footstep. Initially, it was a curiosity. Then, using high-end frequency analysis software, Miles saw the pattern. The sound waves were not linear, they were self-referential. The tick of the clock would trigger a delayed, identical frequency from a low, resonating hum, the sound of something shuddering. The distant drone of traffic was echoed by a sharp, high-pitched snap, perfectly matching the original sound's amplitude. Dewey, Miles Crowley, তার নোটবুক এজবাতি লিখেছিলেন। দি Existential Echo তিনি লিখেছিলেন, তাঁর হাতে লেখা ইতিমধ্যে ব্যাংকে পড়েছিল। This is topological distortion. The sound isn't from the room, it describes the room. A room that is geometrically impossible. Its interior space is at least 3 times its exterior footprint. The longer he listened, the more viscerally he felt the impossible architecture. His familiar studio walls began to feel distant, stretching into an endless dark corridor. He was terrified not of a ghost, but of space itself consuming him. He was found by Rena Sanchez, a book conservator and repair specialist Miles had hired to fix an old amplifier. Rena walked into his studio and found him staring at the running tape, his body vibrating with tension. Rena, pragmatic and focused on tangibles, was instantly repelled, yet drawn in by his notes. She began her own transcription, her penmanship neat and precise, a stark contrast to Miles's frantic script. Rena's footnote, green ink. He believes this is a trap for space. I believe it's a trap for material. When I listen, I feel the texture of everything. My skin, the paper, becoming too smooth, too perfect. This entity is draining the very substance from the room. Miles and Rena became codependent victims. They tried to communicate only through Rena's transcribed notes, convinced that speaking would further empower the sonic entity. One night, Miles made his final, desperate move. He realized the sound's primary goal was to fill its own silence. He decided to give it the ultimate void. He held his breath, pressed the microphone to his mouth, and attempted to generate a perfect, absolute absence of sound. When Rena woke up hours later, Miles was gone. The tape recorder was still running. Rena found one last note written hastily. The echo didn't want my sound. It wanted my silence. I failed. I think it's wearing my heartbeat now. Rena, frozen by the implied horror, began to write a new feverish transcription, her attempt to organize the terror and keep the corridor from taking HA journal. Part 2. Dr. Vance and the aromatic thesis. The dual disappearance of Miles and Rena baffled the NYPD. The notes, the tape, the ramblings about existential echoes. It all led nowhere. However, the files eventually made their way to Dr. Elliot Vance, a tenured but unorthodox professor of cognitive physics. Dr. Vance specialized in aromatic cognition. His radical theory was that every intense emotion, every sharp memory, released a subtle, unique olfactory frequency that could be analyzed like sound. The Miles Rena case became his obsession. He acquired digital copies of the tape in the joint notebook. He viewed them not as victims, but as pioneers who had stumbled into a consciousness trap. Vance believed the entity didn't just want sound or silence, it wanted the sensory data that made a person real. It was draining their senses to construct its own reality. He began his extensive research, compiling his findings into his own disturbing manuscript, the spectral journal Vance's entry. Volume 2. The frequency spike at 700 Hz is not Miles's fear. It is the metallic tang of his blood as his adrenaline surged. The low resonant thrum is Rena's grief, smelling distinctly of old dissolving glue. This entity is a vacuum cleaner for the human experience. Dr. Vance attempted to build a theoretical counterfrequency, a sense nullifier, using a complex array of essential oils and sound wave generators in his lab. He was convinced that if he could overload the entity's capacity for sensory data, he could force it to release Miles and Rena. But the entity was already inside his head. Vance began to lose his sense of smell. At first it was subtle. The coffee was bland, the roses odorless. Then it became profound. He could no longer smell his own skin, his own body. He felt ghost-like. He realized the entity was draining his aromatic memory, the very core of his thesis. In a fit of terror and logic, Vance started destroying his own work. He tore pages from the spectral journal, convinced that the written word was a static form of the frequency, making the horror permanent. He doused the remaining manuscript in chemicals and set it alight. Before the fire department arrived, Dr. Vance left his last testament, scrawled on a fragment of paper. The absence of self is the ultimate frequency. I am going to find the source of the rot. Look for the scent of nothing. Dr. Vance vanished, leaving behind only the acrid smoke, the half-burnt journal, and a chilling void in his intellectual field. Part 3. Liza Greenwood, The Investigative Labyrinth. The vanishing of a third, highly respected academic finally caught the attention of the media. That's where Liza Greenwood, an investigative journalist with a reputation for cold-blooded truth, stepped in. Liza was a skeptic. She saw the case as mass hysteria, a fascinating blend of shared delusion and missing persons reports. Her goal was to expose the truth, the real crime. Liza managed to pull all the fragments together: Miles's Echo notebook, Rena's transcribed pages, and Dr. Vance's burned journal. She started meticulously mapping the connections, tracking the narrative progression from space, Miles to material, Rena to sensation. Vance. They didn't get pulled into a ghost story, Liza typed in her own personal report. They got pulled into a data corruption event. They found something the universe couldn't handle, and their brains shut down to compensate. Liza listened to the tape, but unlike the others, she listened logically, using it only as an auditory artifact to cross-reference with the text. She used visual software to display the sound waves, trying to make the unseen tangible. It worked. She saw the gaps in the sound waves. The moment of repetition, the echo, was not a sound at all, but a hole in the data, a digital void. Liza's report, data point 4. The gap in the waveform is where the sound should be, but isn't. It's the moment of existential theft. It's the sound of the victim's sanity being absorbed, and it is perfectly still. Liza believed she had the ultimate defense: objectivity. She would not let the sounds affect her senses or her reality. She would remain a detached observer. But as she typed her conclusion, her laptop screen began to glitch. The text on her screen inverted, then stretched, making her analytical words look like Rena's frantic scribbles. Her own perfectly structured paragraphs turned into an incomprehensible visual maze. Liza looked at the screen and understood. The entity was not attacking her senses. It was attacking her logic. It was disrupting the very structure of her truth. They didn't get pulled into a ghost story, Liza typed in her own personal report. They got pulled into a data corruption event. They found something the universe couldn't handle, and their brains shut down to compensate. Liza listened to the tape, but unlike the others, she listened logically, using it only as an auditory artifact to cross-reference with the text. She used visual software to display the sound waves, trying to make the unseen tangible. It worked. She saw the gaps in the sound waves. The moment of repetition, the echo, was not a sound at all, but a hole in the data, a digital void. Liza's report. Data point 4. The gap in the waveform is where the sound should be, but isn't. It's the moment of existential theft. It's the sound of the victim's sanity being absorbed. And it is perfectly still. Liza believed she had the ultimate defense: objectivity. She would not let the sounds affect her senses or her reality. She would remain a detached observer. But as she typed her conclusion, her laptop screen began to glitch. The text on her screen inverted, then stretched, making her analytical words look like Rena's frantic scribbles. Her own perfectly structured paragraphs turned into an incomprehensible visual maze. Liza looked at the screen and understood. The entity was not attacking her senses. It was attacking her logic. It was disrupting the very structure of a horrify. She felt a horrifying stillness enter her apartment. The air grew heavy, motionless. She knew the dark, impossible corridor that had taken the others was now forming in her periphery. Liza didn't scream. She didn't cry. She began to type her final report, her fingers moving fast, trying to outrun the collapse of her own logic. The entity's ultimate goal is to create its own self-consistent narrative. It needs a credible witness. It needs my objectivity. It is stealing my structure. Part 4. The final ingress. Liza looked around the room. The air was thick with the sense of 4 presences, not visible, but intensely felt. She heard the phantom sounds, the faint, preemptive tick-tock of Miles's stolen heartbeat, the dry, bitter scent of burnt paper still lingering from Vance's last attempt at destruction, the subtle, unsettling swoosh of Rena's smooth, substanceless skin gliding across the floor. And she heard a new, terrifying sound, the sound of her own typing, coming from a place where no laptop existed, the dark, condensing corner of the room. It was her own logic being used against her. Liza knew she couldn't rely on sound, smell, or sight. She couldn't even rely on logic. She had to break the pattern. She looked at the running tape on the old machine. Instead of turning it off or tearing it up, Liza did what no one else had dared. She used her visual software to create a perfect, absolute zero frequency, a sound that was mathematically so inert it couldn't be echoed, copied, or felt. She then fed this null frequency directly into the tape recorder's microphone. As the null frequency entered the recording, a shattering silence filled the room. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the total rejection of existence. Liza felt the ultimate attack. Her memories, her name, her sense of being Liza Greenwood, all of it was momentarily erased. She fell into the purest void. In that fraction of a second, she saw them. Miles, Rena, and Dr. Vance. They weren't dead, but perfectly preserved, trapped inside the geometric corridor, suspended in their final sensory state, forever echoing the reality they had lost. And then, Liza was gone too. When the authorities eventually entered the room, they found the apartment cold, quiet, and perfectly organized. The only strange element was the laptop screen, which had burned a single message into the display.